Okay, welcome everybody. This is our third edition of the Electrification with the Experts webinar series. So we're excited to keep these going and build interest and excitement around heat pumps and hopefully demystify the world of heat pumps as well. So this webinar, we're really excited to have Toronto Hydro and Energy Neighbor Michelle Hjort here as
You want
well.
to turn that chair aside?
Okay, sorry. We'll get some people muted here. But the So we'll just make sure we're all muted here. I'm just hearing a little bit of feedback there.
It
I-
just it just started up. It's about heat pumps.
I'm glad people are excited about the webinar. So uh, the point of this one is really to get into how the heat pump fits in as a system with all different parts of your home. It can be your ductwork, your electrical work, the insulation, to make sure that it's working as good as possible, that it's purring along happily in the background. So we're really happy to get people in and demystify those ideas. As you're coming in, you're going to see a poll pop up, and that poll is just helping us understand what your existing heating systems are, as well as how old they may be, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's important later on, as well as asking about your postal code. We just use that information because we host community events around the city, so we'd love to be able to connect you with stuff that's going on in your neighborhood. And if you've gone through that poll, it'd be great to just say hello in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from. Are you doing a renovation right now? What got you excited about heat pumps in the first place? And you'll see my colleague Jake in the chat as well. So he's going to be engaging and collecting some of those questions that we have for the Q&A at the end. So you'll see his name popping up, sharing resources, articles, all that good stuff. So just as we've let a handful more people in, I'll just do that quick thing again, and we'll get right into the content after that. So this is the third installment of our Electrification with the Experts series. We're really grateful to have Energy Neighbor and Toronto Hydro here, and I'll introduce our speakers again a little bit more in a second. But our plan here is just to understand the heat pumps as part of all the different systems in your house, your ductwork, and your electrical, and your insulation and demystify how that all fits together and get some best practices so that when you get your heat pump in, it's working exactly as you'd expect. It makes you comfortable, it's running efficiently, and everything's just working very nice. And you'll see that poll pop up, so I recommend you filling that out. And definitely don't be shy. Introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to have some back and forth going on as we go through there. So with that, I'll jump into the content of our webinar. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We're really excited to have you here tonight. So I do land acknowledgements with a bit of a retrospective, a looking backwards. And the second part is kind of present, looking right now, what can we do to really embody that spirit of reconciliation in Toronto? So the first part, we acknowledge the land we're meeting on. It's the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas, so the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, as well as many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people too. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So historically, in the other webinars, I've gone into some sort of political barriers that Indigenous people are facing in Toronto and ways that we can engage with those. And they tend to be pretty like negative focus. So when I came across this article today or the other day about CB, a Cree artist who's up for a Juno right now, and then I started listening to their music, I thought this is a great opportunity to send you guys towards this amazing Indigenous pop singer-songwriter and see if we can get our streams and follows up and embody that spirit of reconciliation in a joyful and celebratory and exciting way. So their name CB means river in their native language, which is Inuanimoan, and it's a beautiful name to go with a beautiful voice. They were born in Mistissini, which is the Central Territory in Quebec, and they've got over 3 million streams. They're really good stuff, and if they were sent this recording, I want them to know that although I found them through CBC Indigenous and they're part of the land acknowledgement, that I really respect their songs, their pop, their production quality, the message of their songs, and I've been sharing it with my friends like crazy. So, Jake, there's some links to their Spotify and their Instagram as well. So if we can get CB a little closer to that Juno, I think that would be a really cool outcome besides getting people excited about heat pumps in this webinar. So with that, I'll move over to tonight's agenda. So we're going through those intros and housekeeping pieces right now. And then I'm going to pass it over to Michael Adalik from Toronto Hydro. We're going to go into some of the support programs that Toronto Hydro has, some free support programs for you guys as well, and some of the ways that they can help you get your heat pump and understand how it fits with your home and demystify those sorts of things. After that, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle. So Michelle is our guest expert speaker from Energy Neighbor, a real champion in this space. Has worked with hundreds of homeowners to make their homes more comfortable and sustainable, and a real expert, has a wealth of knowledge, and is also very friendly and fun to hang out with. So we are very grateful to have Michelle on the webinar tonight. So Michelle's going to get into some of the nitty-gritty on how the heat pump fits in with the rest of your home there. I'm going to cap off the webinar. I'm Nathan. I work for Toronto Home Energy Network. We're hosting the webinar tonight. And we get into some case studies, people that have put in heat pumps. What are things that went well? What are things that we can learn from? And these are all projects in Toronto. We'll get into costs, words of advice, and all that good stuff so you can feel well equipped moving into your own project. At the end, we'll get that live Q&A as promised, but feel free to put in your questions as they come up. We're not going to be interrupting the presentations or asking the speakers to stop. We're going to really put the questions at the end, and we'll stop the recording at that point. So if you want to share a little bit more about your house and your project and where you're calling in from and all of that stuff, it won't end up on YouTube forever. So you don't have to worry about that. I will say, speaking of, we are recording this and it's going to go up on YouTube tomorrow. I also send out a handout with the slides and the resources that are mentioned throughout this webinar. So if something goes by too fast or you miss it in the chat, don't worry. It's all going to come out tomorrow. You'll have that in your inbox. So you can just sit back, relax, enjoy, and spend your evening with us. So I appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to learn a little bit more about this technology that we're really excited about and demystify how HVAC fits in with your home. So I'm going to give you a little bit more on tonight's speakers, and then I'll hand it over to Michael to kick us off in the main body of the content for this webinar. So Michael Adalik, climate action consultant with Toronto Hydro, is an energy coach and conservation engineer. We're really grateful to have a progressive, a forward-looking public utility that's happy to engage with electrification, talk to homeowners, and make that process stress-free and engage with you. There's a lot of utilities in North America that would not be so friendly. There's a lot of coal-burning Midwest states that would never talk about heat pumps. So we're very grateful to have Michael here, and you'll often see him at community events around the city as well. So pumped about that. Michelle is our guest expert speaker tonight. Is a clean energy coach with Energy Neighbor that offers low and no cost guidance to hundreds of Torontonians through emails and calls and visits to help you make your home more sustainable. And because of Michelle's excellent work and work over years, that was recognized with a 2026 Clean 50 award winner. So very excited to hear what Michelle has to say tonight. And I'm finishing off. I'm Nathan. I'm the homeowner journey coordinator. That just means as you're going through your heat pump installation, your home improvement journey, I want to get you the right resources at the right time, get you unstuck, get you talking to the right person. So it feels like a smooth process and not a frustrating one. And we'll talk a little bit about Toronto Home Energy Network, the supports we do after I present those case studies towards the end of the webinar. So with that, I'll say, hey, Michael, why don't you, I'll stop my share here, or you can take over, and we'll get started with your presentation.
Okay, so hopefully that transition went okay and you can see my slide.
Yeah, I can see you and hear you very well.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And for the people on the call too for attending another great heat pump event and learning opportunity, coordinated by Nathan and Jake, our good friends at the Home Energy Network. And Nathan, thanks for that great land acknowledgement. Always learn something when you do these land acknowledgements. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem.
My name is Michael Adelick, and I'm part of the climate action team at Toronto Hydro. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about our products and services to support homeowners on their electrification journey. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background information. So, as some of you may know, the City of Toronto has declared a climate emergency and has established a goal of reaching net zero by 2040. Now, the city has developed a Transform TO strategy that outlines how this goal will be achieved. And in this strategy, there's an emissions breakdown from 2021 that shows where these emissions are being generated. And over 90% of the emissions in the city of Toronto are being generated by buildings and transportation. Now, in order to achieve these ambitious goals, the city actually approached Toronto Hydro to develop a plan and to support their vision. So in response to this, Toronto Hydro created a climate action plan. And this climate action plan is a public document that you can look up on our website. And the plan has 4 goals. First, to deliver significant greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Second, to stimulate and encourage businesses that provide products and services in support of decarbonization. And then to advance social equity in the City of Toronto as well. Now, based on this climate action plan that we provided to the city asked Toronto Hydro, or gave us a mandate to support their efforts in this regard. Now, this climate action plan has 2 kind of areas of focus. The first being an expanded electricity distributor. So Toronto Hydro distributes electricity to all of our customers within the boundaries of Toronto. And what that means, being an expanded electricity distributor, is essentially making sure that the grid is ready for electrification. As part of the city's strategy, 75% of the activities there rely on the grid being ready. So when Toronto Hydro submitted our 2025 to 2029 rate application to the OEB, it detailed our investment plan and strategy for the next 5 years to ensure that the grid is ready for electrification. Now, as part of that support, we're also modernizing the grid. So this includes supporting renewable energy projects like solar or biomass. It means adding functionality so we can have 2-way power flows on the grid from homes that might have solar on them. It also means supporting energy storage and local conservation programs. Now, in the climate action team, I'm actually in the residential part of the team, and the residential part focuses on emissions typically from single-family homes and smaller multi-unit buildings. For these types of structures, the main sources of greenhouse gas emissions are from heating, transportation, and domestic hot water. So, and the solution to decarbonize these sources of emissions is typically to replace fossil fuel appliances with electric ones. So what that means is replacing our home heating with heat pumps, typically electrically driven heat pumps, replacing our internal combustion cars with electrical vehicles, and also electrifying our hot water production. Now, we're not suggesting that everyone do this all at once, but what we're trying to do through our efforts and through this webinar is to educate homeowners about the options, so that kind of when it comes time to make a decision or change an appliance, that homeowners are armed with the information and the tools to make a decision that's aligned with their goals and values. Now, we focus on heat pumps because they do a really great job at replacing fossil fuel heating equipment. And the nature of the refrigeration cycle that's used in heat pumps, we can leverage super high efficiencies on the order of 300 to 500%. Now, these sometimes sound intangible or unreachable, but heat pumps are a proven technology that have been around globally for decades and even in Canada. And we like to actually remind people that you've probably interacted with a heat pump in your daily routine for a long time. And that example is your refrigerator. The added benefit of heat pumps when it actually comes time to think about it from a whole home perspective is that those heat pumps are typically reversible, so they can actually do heating and cooling. So we can also leverage the efficiency and having kind of two appliances in one. Now, through our engagements and our journey, we've kind of heard from homeowners that have undertaken the electrification journey. And some of the benefits that we hear from them are that their comfort has improved. Through the adoption of heat pumps, their temp more consistent, the humidity levels have been more consistent, making them more comfortable. Often we see that there are cost savings associated with electrifying homes, and especially when we can couple electrification measures with other home efficiency improvements. Another benefit that we typically hear is the better air quality. So in the home and around the home, we can avoid burning fossil fuels and we can avoid having those harmful emissions. EVs are another example where we are seeing more evidence of kind of the benefits. We're seeing increased battery capacity, increased ranges, the evidence that's suggesting that there's savings when switching from an internal combustion to an EV is become more prominent. Even the electrical infrastructure for charging and availability to connect chargers is also being further developed. So again, another way that we're supporting that migration and transition. And lastly, we wanted to also kind of keep in mind the domestic hot water production. So this is a great opportunity to reduce emissions as well, either from an electric tank perspective or an electric tankless type water heater. But if we were really interested in energy efficiency, we would want to try and leverage that super high efficiency of the heat pump. And we can do that through the adoption of heat pump water heaters. And again, data is suggesting that there are significant operational savings when we can transition to one of those super high efficient heat pump water heaters on the order of 50%. Now, Toronto Hydro has some products and services to help homeowners on their electrification journey. These products and services include free energy coaching. We've also developed a directory to connect homeowners with qualified contractors that are providing goods and services for decarbonizing. We've also enhanced the connection process for connecting solar and batteries to the grid. And we're also continuing to maintain a presence in the community. So going to community events, having conversations with homeowners, making sure that they're armed with the right information. And if they've got misinformation, if they've heard myths, to help them address those. So energy coaching is typically a one-on-one video call with a Toronto Hydro energy coach. And these are great ways to get your questions answered about heat pumps, to maybe discuss some of the myths or misinformation, and to get a further look at some of Toronto Hydro's tools and resources. Now, some of the things that we typically talk about on energy coaching calls are things like home heating load, energy audits to identify opportunities and maybe quantify them, heat pump sizing, ductwork, backup heating, electrical service upgrade, heat pump controls, and the list can go on. Other things that we talk about on the energy coaching calls are things like the building envelope. So if we can make our homes more insulated and more airtight, our heating appliance may not have to be as big. It can keep us more comfortable, and we can maybe start to see some of those utility savings. But generally, the lack of insulation and air leakage in the building envelope can be a large contributor to heat loss. Now, in the colder temperatures that we've been having more recently in Toronto, it can sometimes be easy to see opportunities. So like ice damming here can be an area where the home is maybe losing heat. So these are maybe things that we want to keep in mind and maybe investigate. And actually, if not addressed, ice damming can create further problems, which maybe need more substantial repairs down the road. In my own home, actually, I recently identified an electrical plug that was on an exterior wall that felt like it was just open to the outside air. And it was really drafty and needed to be sealed. So sometimes they're as obvious as icicles hanging off of the roof, or other times you really have to get down and maybe touch or feel something. Other good opportunities for air leakage and insulation are typically old fireplaces or attic hatches. Now, you can do this kind of yourself, but also a good quality energy audit will identify these opportunities and also be able to quantify what the benefit might be to your home. And in that regard, one of the things we also talk about on our energy coaching calls is the need for backup heat. So what we've got here is a graph from a Natural Resources Canada heat pump sizing tool. I'm going to just describe this graph here quickly for you. So what we've got here in the solid red line is a home's heat loss. So as we move to the left on the graph here, our outdoor air temperature is decreasing. So our home's heat loss consequently increases. So if we were picking a heat pump, if we picked a heat pump at a given temperature, if the dashed line, which represents a heat pump's heat output, falls below the red line, this might be a situation where we might need to do some backup heating. Now, that might be one option, or we might improve our building envelope, reduce that heat loss, or we might pick a different heat pump altogether. So in this particular example, I'm kind of showing here a line at maybe about minus 17 degrees Celsius, right here. And if we pick the yellow heat pump, we would have a deficiency of heat output from our heat pump of maybe about 12,000 BTUs. So again, we can maybe think about a backup system like this electric resistance coil that is sometimes installed in ductwork in furnaces to provide that supplemental heat. We can maybe reduce our heat loss or pick a different heat pump. If we went maybe with this orange heat pump here, maybe we've now reduced our heat deficiency substantially. So again, one of the things that we kind of talk about or describe on our energy coaching calls. Another thing that we kind of go through is the services that are available through your Toronto Hydro portal. So this is places where you can get your historical energy usage. You can use this data to identify opportunities for conservation or efficiency. You can also use your portal to get your peak demand. And this number can be important when you're maybe considering upgrading your electrical service as a result of electrification. There's also a price comparison feature in your Toronto Hydro portal, which can help determine which is the best rate structure for you. So, and it can do the calculation and the math and show you which one is most beneficial for you based on your behavior. Now, in that regard, Toronto Hydro has also seen examples of homes that have fully electrified on 100 amp services and still potentially have spare capacity. So if you're having a conversation with your electrician or HVAC contractor, have your historical data and your peak demand handy so that you can help support and explore other options or possibilities. And lastly, and to kind of summarize, what we're suggesting to homeowners is that they kind of get prepared, that they have a plan. Maybe start with an inventory of your home appliances and know how old they are, maybe what condition they're in and when they might need to be changed. Maybe do some research and get educated about what options you have, and again, which ones might align best with your goals and values. We also suggest connecting with a local community organization like the Toronto Home Energy Network and a couple of the local community organizations that operate more locally. These community organizations, and Nathan, I think, is going to describe this, but are a great place to connect with other homeowners, hear stories, hear about challenges and pitfalls and things to avoid. And lastly, just to take away where their opportunities are for those larger places that typically contribute to our greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so that brings us to the end of my deck. So thank you for allowing me to some time here on your webinar.
No, I appreciate it, Michael. Thanks for getting in depth. And I hadn't thought of looking at the where the icicles are on the outside of the house as a way to like proxy how leaky and find opportunities for leakage. So I'm definitely going to be walking up and down my street like, ooh, what's going on there? What's going on there?
What I've been doing for the last 2.5 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, that's really fun. All right, appreciate it. Thank you so much for getting into that, Michael. And with that, I'll throw it over to Michelle, and feel free to take over sharing your screen, or Michael will stop sharing his screen there, and then we can get into the nitty-gritty of how your house works with heat pumps.
All right. Hello, everybody. I am going to jump right into it because there's a lot that I want to share here about heat pumps. All right, just quickly first, an overview of the different types. I noticed that about 70% of the people on the call do have forced air furnaces, but about 20% have RADs. So different types of heat pumps are relevant for you. What we're most familiar with, and those of you with forced air furnace would be looking typically at an air source heat pump. You see the centrally ducted here. On the left is the indoor unit of a heat pump that's fully electrified. This, as you can see, it's kind of about the size of what your furnace was before, so it's a very easy swap in and out with the furnace. It attaches quite easily to your previous ductwork. In the middle, you see what the outdoor unit looks like. This is kind of like what your air conditioner looked like, slightly different shape. It goes up on a snow stand because it needs to keep snow off of it in the winter. And in fact, with this recent snow, I was emailing a whole lot of folks who've installed just to make sure that they went out there and cleared away the snow from underneath it and from the back. And then on the right the side, what you see is a hybrid heat pump. And this is one where the existing furnace is paired with a heat pump. And you can't even see, but the heat pump, that coil on the bottom is actually in the ductwork above. And how this works is that the heat pump, depending on the heat load of the house, can do all of the cooling and most of the heating and possibly even all of the heating. But the furnace fan is used to blow over those coils for the heating and cooling. And then the furnace can serve as a backup for that heat pump if it's needed. And then these are also air source heat pumps, but they're ductless. And for people who have RADs and are looking at adding some cooling and then maybe and also some heating, this could be an option for you because you don't have the ductwork. The outdoor unit looks the same. And you have a couple of options for indoor units. The one you're most used to seeing is that wall-mounted one on the top, probably. But there's also floor units, like you see on the lower right. And sometimes, especially for those of us with attic conversions, or you see like the room that I'm in here, it's the with the knee walls on the side, there isn't much place to put the wall-mounted unit. So sometimes the floor unit can serve well. And the ceiling cassette also, there's ones that can fit between joists. Or bigger ones, but you do need to then be able to have some space for that. But it's nice to know that you've got those options. You can typically put up to 4 heads on one outdoor unit. So the outdoor unit might be, for instance, a 3-ton unit, 36,000 BTUs, and then maybe you have the heads inside, up to 4 of them, that would add up to 36,000. The smallest one can be 6,000 and usually could be up to 18. And then the air to water heat pump, this is also an option for people with RADs. You've got the outdoor unit that looks similar to the other outdoor units, but it is quite a bit bigger. And then you have a system where the heat pump is pulling heat from the air, but then it is transferring it to water. And then that's going through your RADs. There's a number of steps to this that I won't get into now, but this is a solution that is very common in Europe because, especially in Britain, everybody has RADs there, and this is how they switch to heat pumps. Here, not as common. We're starting to see them come in, which is what we want because we want the economies of scale for the prices to come down and for installers to become more familiar. But we are starting to see those, which is really great for folks who have RADs. The one shortcoming is that your existing RADs are not going to be able to produce cooling, but you can put in something called a fan coil that can do both heating and cooling. It would need a separate cold water line. There's some things to consider, but it can be done. And then there's the ground source heat pump. So you see two ways to do it. On the left, you see the horizontal lines, and on the right, you see an image with a vertical. Horizontal costs less just because it's easier to lay that. These have a larger upfront cost, but they last for a very long time and are a great long-term investment. We mostly see them like in cottage country where people know they're going to have a property in the family for multiple generations, and they want to invest in an excellent system that's going to serve them well for a long time. And I will say that we have worked on some ground source heat pumps in the city, so it is possible. You can get a permit. A friend of mine did it. She's got 3 boreholes in her driveway that are doing the ground source, so it's entirely possible. Okay, now I'm going to move into what really is the topic of this webinar, which is heat pump prep, or how to get prepared for a heat pump. We know, and we've heard that typically always in the past, when your HVAC fails, you call your contractor and they come and change it, and it's not a good day, but it all works out fine. If you're switching to a heat pump, there's a few preliminary steps that it would be good to do in advance, because what we really don't want is for you to be the 85% of people who wait for your equipment to fail. And then you might be tempted to put in another furnace because it's cold outside and you haven't done your homework. And what's really a bummer about that is now you've locked in gas for another 15 to 20 years in your home. So to take some steps to prepare is what we're wanting to encourage you to do. And I'm going to give you some of the things that you can do to be ready. So I'm putting forward 4 main things to do for heat pump prep. 2 of them have to do with arriving at the correct size of heat pump. Oops, why did that happen? And then the other 2 are limiting factors that you need to be aware of. So first, the heat load calculation, and this needs to be done to get the correct heat pump size, ductwork evaluation, circuit panel evaluation, and figuring out the outdoor location. And so I'll go through each of those with you here. Okay, first, the heat load calculation. This is really important. Determines the heat load of your home, which is used for the correct sizing of the heat pump. Historically, what would be done is somebody might do a rule of thumb, like, well, your house is about 1,200 square feet, therefore it's probably a 2-ton heat pump. That is not the way to do it, because like you see here, these semis that are side by side, one of those could need a 2-ton heat pump and one of those could need a 3.5-ton heat pump, because one of them has had improvements with windows, insulation, air sealing, and the other one hasn't. And that's, in the past with the furnace, if they were way oversized, it impacts the comfort of your home, but it's not that big of a deal. But for heat pumps, they really do need to be right sized, and I'll talk a little bit more about why. And so the other piece is I'm saying here what not to do, not the size of your previous furnace. Your previous furnace is your existing furnace, your previous furnace is probably 60 to 80,000 BTUs. It is probably at 2 to 3 times oversized. And that's just way bigger than what you need for a heat pump. So how do we figure out the heat load of your home? 2 main methods. One, an energy audit, and 2 is an energy use-based calculation, sometimes called a performance-based calculation or a fuel use-based calculation. This is my favorite way to do it because it is they're using real-world numbers. I have you send me your Enbridge bill. You can download 2 years worth of your Enbridge consumption, and we look at how much fuel did your home actually need to be comfortable. And then you can let me know if you were away for a certain number of days, or if you keep your thermostat really low, and we might adjust for that. But it helps come up with a number based on what you actually have used to actually make your home comfortable, what the equivalent heat pump would be. The other thing that you can do is get an energy audit, and the auditors will come in and do spend a couple of hours measuring windows, doors, and insulation, and they have a tool that they put those numbers into, it's great, but they're very conservative. So it's theoretical. They have to be super conservative, and I have seen those often where they're twice as high as the real world performance-based calculation. It's kind of nice to have both numbers because you can base the heat pump size on the real world, put it, but have a bit of a safety margin, and then you can say have backup available for what that super conservative scenario might be. And we know, like we've seen in the last week, that climate change is going to bring changes to our weather that are unexpected. So we do want to be prepared for all eventualities. This slide shows a little bit about what I was saying there to comparing heating capacity. You've got at the top a single stage furnace, which many of our homes have. They're 5 to 10 tons. They don't even make heat pumps that big. So if an HVAC contractor comes in and says, oh, well, your home needs 60,000 BTUs, so you can't get a heat pump, it's like, well, that's not actually the heat load of your home. You're actually going to be over here on the left. And just, you know what, I'll just clarify because sometimes the language can get confusing. I'm throwing around BTUs and tons. 12,000 BTUs equals 1 ton. The heat pumps come in half-ton sizes. So the most common ones that we see in Toronto are 2.5 or 3 tons. And mostly in Old Toronto, we're seeing 2.5 or 3 tons. So that's over in this area over here on the left. And then the shoulder seasons, you're only needing, 1 to 2 tons. And then you might, in the colder seasons, go up to 4. So your cold climate heat pump is going to cover all of that territory. And one thing that's really great about cold climate heat pumps is they have variable inverters. So they can go down to 30% of their capacity. So in the shoulder seasons, they can be running continuously, but at the lower amount of production. And then on the coldest days, they can go up to 100%. Okay, the next piece is the ductwork evaluation. First, you might say, well, why is that needed? Like if my ductwork was good enough for my furnace, why isn't it good enough for my heat pump? The heat pumps actually, sorry, I'm flipping too fast here. The heat pumps actually create heat at a slightly lower temperature than the furnace. And so they need a higher volume of airflow to move the same amount of heat. And so that's why we need to make sure that your ductwork is going to be big enough for your heat needs. So once we do the heat load calculation, measure the ductwork and make sure that it's big enough to put the amount of heat through it that you need. It's possible that it's not, in which case we look at some options. One might be if it's close, like to do some things to your ductwork where we can increase the return drop size, we can increase the filter size so you can get more negative pressure pulling it through. If it's close, we might also measure the static pressure just to make sure that you're not going to have resistance problems in there. And then the other thing is that if there's a significant difference, then maybe you're going to look at backup. Maybe you need a furnace backup. You can do electric coil backup, or you might look at doing some insulating and air sealing of your home. But what I can tell you is that I work primarily in Old Toronto, and there's only been 3 homes that I've worked on where they needed a furnace backup. Everybody else was able to do it with a heat pump, a fully electric system with some electric coil backup, and that was completely reasonable. So the right sizing, why does it matter? We're looking for the Goldilocks solution here. We don't want it to be too big and we don't want it to be too small. If it's too big, it will short cycle, so it'll run and stop and run and stop. And then you're completely losing the benefit of a heat pump, because one of the things that I was saying is so great about the heat pumps is the goal is for them to run continuously, but at the right level. So say in October, when you don't need as much heat, it's going only at 30%, but it's running almost continuously. That's what you want. And people are called like, wait a minute, my heat pump's running all the time. I'm like, good, that's what you want. But at the right level for it to go. And the benefit of that is then that heat has the opportunity to go throughout your house, to permeate the walls and the furniture and the floor, and to create significantly more comfort. If you have short cycling, like you probably do with your oversized furnace, the heat blasts on, it reaches the thermostat, and then it turns off, and it hasn't had the chance to run. Oversized furnaces are sometimes only running 15% of the time, and that's definitely not enough for them to get everywhere. But the other problem is that if you make a heat pump that's too big, it's trying to force too much air through the ductwork. It's going to be noisy in the ducts. It will stress out the blower motor that could fail earlier. And then the other piece is you won't get as nice of the summer dehumidification. So what you want for summer is you want that heat pump running again all the time, not off and on, because the more time it's going over the coils, that's where it condenses, and that's where you get the dehumidification. And we know that the humidity is the most uncomfortable part of our summers. So you want as much dehumidification as you can get out of that heat pump. Now, the other size is why we don't want it to be too small. Well, then you need more backup. So I saw a report recently that 50% of heat pumps installed in Ontario are too small. And the reason is because a whole bunch of HVAC contractors are being lazy, and they're putting in a furnace backup with a 2-ton heat pump. And that's just what they always do. They don't measure heat load. They don't measure ducts. It's the lazy thing for them to do. They put it in, and then they make the switchover temperature at like 5 degrees Celsius. So the heat pump is hardly doing any heating. It's mostly doing cooling. And then you're using the furnace a lot. But that contractor, it was easy for them. They didn't have to do any homework in terms of helping you get the right solution for your home. And we don't want to see that. I mean, our part of our goal is to use less fossil fuels. So we want to be able to right size the heat pump and ideally not need to have a furnace. All right, the backup options, and Michael showed these wonderful toaster coils here as well, but in this Mitsubishi unit in the middle, it's actually labeled, but you can't quite tell. On the bottom is where the blower is, and then in the middle is where that coil is, and then the top is where the electric backup can go in. And there's actually just a little slot for it that it can go in, and it looks like this little guy on the left. And what's nice about having electric coil backup is that it operates in tandem with the heat pump. They can both go at the same time. So if your heat pump if it's really cold out, like it was recently, and you have your thermostat set for 20 and your heat pump can only get to 18, well, the electric coils kick in to top it up. It's all good. You don't want to have those run a lot, because that is more expensive heat. It's like baseboard heat. But to have that available for, certain number of hours a year to help top up, rather than having to put in a whole furnace and to have all that combustion and toxic chemicals, like it's way preferred, and it's really nice. But sometimes it does make sense to have the hybrid solution, which I'm showing over there on the right. One reason might be you have a furnace that's only a few years old. Well, you can put the heat pump, pair it with the furnace, use the blower and the fan from the furnace. The heat pump serves to do your air conditioning, and then it can do most of your heating. So that can be a very nice solution. It's also a nice way for people to add air conditioning. A lot of us have managed to live many years without an air conditioner and are quite content. However, with climate change, our summers are getting increasingly uncomfortable. And so to consider adding air conditioning, this is a way that you can do that and take the edge off of your heating as well. And then the other piece I was saying is that if we do your heat load calculation, look at your ductwork and say like, you know what, your heat load calc's a little bit too high for what your ductwork can handle. And we look at your backup options, and then maybe take a look at improving the envelope of your home. Maybe there's some low-hanging fruit that you could do. Most of the homes that I work with in Toronto have done maybe finish the basement and maybe blown in insulation to the attic, and that is usually enough to make your home tight enough for a heat pump. But if you're considering doing better, or if there's other things that you can add. The attic insulation is always one of the least expensive, least invasive, and most effective things that you can do. Basement insulation as well is a great thing to add. You do those two things, you significantly reduce the stack effect. That's a major way of moving air through your house. So those are options. And I think Nathan's going to speak to this, but for the rebate program that's in the provincial rebate program, those things do have rebates available for them. Insulating, air sealing, windows, doors, and heat pump water heater. If it makes sense for you to consider this, then I would always recommend an energy audit. We work with great energy auditors who can provide you some very good coaching on these things, and very unbiased, and I can tell you to ballpark prices on things just so you can have a budget sense of whether it's realistic at all for you to do some of these things. And especially if you're going to be in your home for a while, if you'd like to age in place, to improve it, make it more comfortable, could be a great idea for you. Okay, so the other piece that can be a limiting factor, your ductwork, and then the other piece is your circuit panel. The good news is that for most people in Toronto, we have 100 amps, and for most of us, that's totally fine. It is one of the myth-busting things that we have to do, because I just had a homeowner who had an electrician in and was like, oh, if you're getting a heat pump, you got to upgrade to 200 amps. And so I helped him go on to his Toronto Hydro account, and like Michael had shared as well. And while we were on the call, the guy looked it up and he started cracking up. And I was like, what is so funny? He goes, okay, well, my home's peak load is 22 amps. Meaning in the last 2 years, the single hour, the highest amount he used was 22 amps. So clearly he's fine for, getting a heat pump. But there's two questions about your panel. One is the capacity, like how much do you have coming in from the street, maybe 100 amps. And then the other is how much room is there on your circuit panel. And even if it's full, you can use the quads or the space savers often to find room. And we have helped loads of people do full home electrification on 100 amps. And that's, heat pump, water heater, induction stove, and sometimes even an EV charger. If you're doing the EV charger, it probably has something called a load sharing device, where it pauses when it reaches 80, when your home's at 80% of capacity, and then when you've turned off some appliances, then it comes back on. And that's another thing that's happening as electrification is advancing, is there's some really great technologies like the load sharing devices, the splitters, the smart panels, that are going to be able to help us manage all of this. So you're going to be fine. But if you want to right now, jump on and see what your Toronto Hydro peak load is. You go into your My account, do track my energy use, and oops, sorry, I keep doing that. And then click on want to see your peak demand, and click on learn more, and it'll show you the amount. And it even has a safety margin built in of like 25%. So it's great. And most of the people that we work with are not over 30 amps. The other thing could be, the other issue with your panel could be the age or the brand. There are some panels, Commander brand and Stablock brand, that you can no longer find the circuits because they've had safety issues with them. So that could be a reason that you might consider updating the panel. But that could still mean you're using 100 amps. You're just getting a new panel, which costs considerably less than having to upgrade to 200 amps. We're seeing about $5,000 to upgrade to 200 amps, and that includes $700 fee with Toronto Hydro. You have to make the appointment. You have to wait a couple weeks or more. Where the 100 amp, if you need to just get a new panel, will cost considerably less. The few times when maybe people do need 200 amps is if you've got a full basement apartment with all the appliances. Maybe you have a hot tub, like a kiln, somebody had a little triathlon pool in their back, like stuff like that. But for most of us mere mortals, 100 amps is just fine. Okay, then the other question is outdoor unit location. Now you might think that's not that big of a deal, but this photo shared by our friend Tom Kleppel of so in the winter, heat pumps produce a lot of condensate. Um, and different conditions that it creates more. If it's quite humid outside and if it's between 0 and 10, it seems to be where it creates the most. But so we're going to look for a place that's not on a walkway where you're going all of the time. And so it's nice if you have a spot over soil. They can be attached to up to sides of houses, and you'll see them all the time if you walk through your neighborhood. But you just need to, it should be on masonry to avoid any kind of vibration that could occur. And the other consideration is if it's 3 tons and up, it has 2 fans, and you're not putting that up on the wall. That needs to be on the ground. When you add the 2 fan one plus the 18-inch stand, that's my height, 5'8". So that's tall. Not putting that on the side of your house. Okay. Quickly about the rebates. There's 2 rebate streams as of January 28th of last year. I think Nathan might speak to the audit stream, but heat pumps are no longer require an audit. You don't have to get an energy audit to get a heat pump rebate, but what you do need is to have an installer that's on the list, and you have to use a qualifying heat pump that's on NRCan's eligible list. And the installer is the one who submits the rebate for you. The rebates, the average that we're seeing, because most of what we install is 2.5 tons, is $1,250. So that helps. It helps. It's not as large as some rebates were previously, but it's good to take the edge off. Another note, if your home is currently heated with electricity, the rebates are twice as much. So if you have baseboard heating, and because this is, heat pumps use about 1/3 of the electricity of baseboard heating, the incentives are higher to support you to make the shift. And in that case, then you're probably going to be doing ductless heat pump. And that's it. And I don't think we're going to do Q&A now. I think that's going to be done at the end, right, Nathan?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna jump in with my presentation, but thank you so much. I mean, I was laughing when you brought up someone having a kiln when they're imagining their electrical service. I imagine you'd need a
We've
pretty good
seen
panel
it.
to run a
We've seen
kiln.
it. Yeah.
Wow, very cool. Okay, so I'm gonna take over here so we can. Okay, sorry. Lost me there for a second. All right. You see my screen? We can move on with the case studies and the kind of things that we can learn from that. So this segment I've done in previous webinars as well. We called it the home runs and strikeouts section. That was inspired by the Blue Jays run to the World Series. I thought about, revamping it for the Olympics on Friday, like gold medals, but then I couldn't figure out what the second part was, like disqualifications. And so if you guys have any ideas, throw those in the chat. We'll crowdsource it. Maybe the next one will be Olympics themed. But it was the idea behind this is to learn from projects that went really well. What can we take away from those? And learn from projects that did not go so well and learn all those things. So before I get into those case studies, just a quick word on what the Toronto Home Energy Network does, and then we'll dive into that content. So at the highest level, we're a nonprofit. We don't have anything to sell you. We just want to make sure you're making the right choice for your home, your values, your budget, what your family's comfortable with, as well as presenting some of those best practices, demystifying the world of heat pumps through webinars like this, and myth busting things like Michelle was saying with you need a 200 amp panel to get a heat pump. That's not true, but we hear it all the time. So that's why we like to have these awareness building webinars. So thank you guys for coming out and engaging with those. So the first strikeout, typically I would engage with a particular homeowner's project, but as Michelle was saying, 85% of people do not proactively replace their equipment. So I thought that was a good strikeout to say getting a red tag on your furnace or your boiler is very avoidable. Trying to push your equipment just one more year means you can often end up with no heat in February. So the mantra to kind of take in on strikeouts is that procrastination is not your friend in this situation. We can definitely avoid this big scary red tag coming into your basement. So just to go more in depth of like what actually happens if you are not proactive with your replacements of your furnace or your boiler, you're going to get rush fees that are going to add hundreds to your installation. So that's a hit to your wallet right away. You're in a moment of desperation, so there's not a lot you can do about those rush fees in that situation. You're also likely going to have a rush job. You're on a long list of jobs that need to be done quickly if your furnace fails in January or February. So you're probably not getting the tender loving care that you might get in a shoulder season replacement, for example. So we always recommend people doing work in the spring or fall before those really, really busy HVAC replacement seasons kick in, and you might not get the attention that your home deserves. And it's also a missed opportunity to do some shopping around for quality models, trying to find extended warranties or deals, because again, you're in that point of desperation. You're not going to be able to act from a place of, good bargaining or power in that situation. So important to not procrastinate in this situation. And it feels like an annoying spend, but it's part of home maintenance, like a roof. Like people expect they're going to have to replace their roof on a schedule. They may save up for that over time. But often people don't think about HVAC. Once every 20 years they think about HVAC. So you guys are not like that in the webinar. So appreciate you thinking ahead and thinking about the plan. And we're gonna get now into like, how old is my HVAC? We generally have a sense, oh, maybe it's newer or maybe it's older. But you can actually find with a relative degree of certainty how old your equipment is without having to, dig up old owner's manuals or do any crazy clue finding or anything like that. So finding that age, your service tags are a really good friend for this one. So when you get annual inspections on a furnace or a boiler by law, they need to put up these little paper tags. And crucially, on these tags, the serial number for your furnace or boiler is going to be on there. And you can do some reverse engineering with Google and with another guide that will link you guys here as well to translate your serial number into the manufacturing date of your furnace or boiler. And that gives you a pretty good idea of how old your HVAC equipment is. And if you're getting to that 15-year mark, that's the kind of industry standard replacement timing, where you're going to get those carbon monoxide leaks if you start to push it a little bit more. That equipment's going to be running longer. It's going to have dirty fans. It's going to get a little dirtier and noisier. So that's a good standard replacement window where you're going to want to be proactive about your replacements. Jake should be linking in our Age of HVAC guide that we put up on our website here. So that just helps you walk through the steps, how to find your serial number and how to translate that serial number into the age of your HVAC. And also, what happened when I tried to do that. And so it's kind of a fun story up there. But we understand that, best plans can still crumble. And sometimes your equipment may give out well before that 15-year mark or before you've had a chance to actually get around to doing a proactive replacement. We've got a guide for that too. Don't worry. We got the emergency furnace replacement guide. And the reality is, as Michelle was alluding to as well, when you're in these desperate emergency situations, everything's going to push you towards getting a new gas furnace, which really sucks. It's locking that in for another 15 years and inefficient, polluting technology. And so you're going to feel a little bit bad about that. So this emergency furnace guide, it helps you through the process by, where to find these trustworthy contractors. The second one's crucial, questions to ask them when you call up on the phone, especially if you're newer to heat pumps, especially if you're in an emergency situation. There's going to be little details to pick up. So we have a very helpful guide with the questions that you can ask them when you get them on the phone, some price ranges that you'd expect in these types of situations, and some tips on understanding your quote. Because words like BTUs and tons and SEER, you're going to see a lot of jargon on there on the quote that you get. So being able to demystify and decode that jargon quickly is going to help you in that situation. So that guide is going to have that as well. So in summary, don't be precious about your old equipment. Be like Ron Swanson here. Get it in the dumpster when it's time so you're not stuck in the cold in the middle of February. So that we'll jump over to the home runs, and this one is focused on a particular homeowners, Jennifer and Dan over in the East End, who sat down with us and did a great case study, which we really appreciate. The mantra I want to take home from this one is this: get curious. Get curious about your HVAC system. How do things work? How do things plug in together? Attending this webinar, great step. Michelle was awesome getting into all the different pieces you need to think about. And I love Jennifer's quote here. She's just like, honestly, I just walked around the neighborhood. I got curious. I was looking at these people, heat pumps, where do they go, how tall they are, how does it all fit together. It can be a fun thing once you start to demystify the world and it's not intimidating anymore. You can have that enjoyment of finding out more about your HVAC systems. So a little bit more about Jennifer and Dan's project. They're in the East End. They had a 1919 semi-detached home that had some moderate work done to it over its past, but nothing major, no big shell upgrades or anything like that. And they had aging HVAC equipment that needed to be replaced. They were being proactive. Their AC, well, somewhat proactive. Their AC broke. They got it repaired. It broke again. They knew their furnace was getting older, so you know what? This is the time. I'm going to be proactive, try to replace it. And they did their project last year in 2025. And they were generous in giving their project budget to us. So with $22,000, they totally transformed their home status quo. They got two heat pumps, that is one for space heating and one for water heating, which Michael was talking a little bit about there. They fixed up their ductwork, so they did some sealing to make sure that it was working very efficiently and the conditioned air wasn't leaking out of the house. They did update their electrical because they had an older panel, but they didn't upgrade their service. They just did some improvements there. And they added some insulation to the top floor. And Michelle, yes, I'm going to get into some rebate stuff. They were able to qualify for some rebates. So we'll get into talking about that now. But again, a quote from Dan here is just, they said they would have done these improvements in the natural course of owning their home anyway. So the heat pump installation was just a little bit of that extra push to do these things that really improve their home status quo, especially if you're aging in place, especially if you have a home office or you're working from home a couple days a week. It's really worthwhile investing in this. Toronto, we have very few comfortable days where you can just open a window and be nice. You usually need some sort of appliance to be keeping you comfortable. So it's worth making sure that appliance is working as best as it can. It's the right size and it's hooked up to your ducts efficiently, and the insulation is keeping all that good conditioned air in the house and you're air sealed and all that good stuff. So diving a little bit more into their three wins. They acted before their furnace failed. I know, broken record, but it's worthwhile. So that's definitely the take home from this webinar is, proactive, not reactive. They got help from a retrofit advisor. So this is the Home Energy Network's name for people like Michelle for the energy coaching that Toronto Hydro does. Our previous webinar was with Sarah Grant. We call her a retrofit advisor as well. If you've been seeing Casper in the chat as well, he's with Windfall Energy, and they also help homeowners make their homes more comfortable and sustainable. And you just get to have those plain English conversations, translating the jargon, figuring out what the best fit is for you. So it's definitely worth getting in contact with someone like Michelle to help out on your project. And often it's not adding any cost and you're getting a lot of benefit from that. So it's a great win. They did do energy assessments, or energy audits. Those are kind of interchangeable terms. And I'll get more into the nitty-gritty of that on the next slide. Michelle talked about it a little bit, but they did that so they'd be eligible for more money back rebates, and they were able to get $3,625 back. About half of that was on their heat pump, and about half of that was the other upgrades they were making, like their heat pump water heater, for example. And with this work, they were able to get totally off of gas. And I think that's one of the big bonus wins for that. They actually measured, and in a single project, they were able to reduce their home's carbon emissions by 4.3 tons every year with one project, right? So this is why we get so many people, including us, are really excited about heat pumps and excited to share them with you, because this is not totally changing your life, your diet, or not having to travel, or, one project can really fundamentally change your home status quo, and your comfort's better too. So it's learning these best practices, busting these myths. It's all really worthwhile. And I'll do a quick note on energy assessments before describing our model. I know we're pushing a little bit into the Q&A time here, so I'll make sure these things are brief. And again, slides and our resources are going to be coming out in the handout tomorrow. So don't worry if something is missed or you didn't catch it right away. Comfort is a science. Embracing that is really great. I mean, energy assessments do cost money, between $400 or $500. So some people are like, hey, I didn't budget for that. But crucially, they identify the biggest bang for your buck improvements and projects you might be able to skip. Maybe you don't need $7,000 of installation. Maybe, like Michael was saying, you have this plug, or I've heard as well, like kitchen vent fans that are literally dumping cold air into your house. It's like having a window open. And just these little inexpensive fixes are maybe all you need to do. So $400 or $500 in, but potentially saving on doing these unnecessary upgrades. And the home renovation savings program does cover about 50% of these costs. You need to do one before and after your project, before to get the status quo, after to prove that the updates you made were actually energy efficient and did improve that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the rebate program in a future webinar, so I'll allude to that. But that closes the home runs section. And I think in summary, science rules. Embrace that in your home. It's worth taking those extra steps and doing a little bit of homework, but it's going to serve you for the next 15 and 20 years of that. So with that, I'll go into a little bit of our supports quickly, but I'll prompt Jake here to send up a second poll, which is just going to be about, hey, we've covered a lot of ground here. How can we help you? Like, is there any snags or any things that would be particularly useful for you to see now? So I definitely encourage people to fill out that second poll that Jake just threw up on the screen there. And while that's going, I'll just give you a little bit of information on the support that the Toronto Home Energy Network has made. So we made this really fun document called the Your First Heat Pump Guidebook to kind of cover the map of the things that you need to be aware of when switching from a furnace or a boiler to a heat pump. So which heat pumps work well in which homes, installation speed bumps, and it's a totally free download. So if you're new to the heat pump possibility, this is a really great place to start, and it links out to all kinds of articles and videos. So it's a really nice kind of foundational resource. So Jake should share that download link in the chat for you guys, which is really nice. We're going to have a webinar, two webinars coming up at the beginning of March. On the 3rd, we're going to go deep into the home renovation savings program, and we're going to have a speaker from that program actually describe that, so that's really nice. Then the second one, if you have baseboard heaters or an oil furnace, they can be replaced for free. There is an energy affordability program, but it is an income eligible program, so I want to emphasize that. It's not for everyone. There are income eligibility requirements, but we're going to be doing some outreach around that because it's a really great opportunity for renters and lower income homeowners to get a modern heat pump when they've been stuck with this aging equipment for an inefficient equipment for a long time. So the registration links are coming out soon. We're just working out some last details with our guest speakers there. And joining our fun and infrequent newsletter for updates is the best way to keep up to date with that. So we definitely encourage you to join our newsletter, which we'll have a link up in the chat and the handout after for that. Our big goal at the Toronto Home Energy Network is to have in-person and digital support for every Torontonian and to make it fun and delightful. Seriously, we run heat pump parties where people with heat pumps come over, they show off the technologies. Maybe Michelle will be there, and we just talk about their comfort and what they had to do. And you can ask questions about your home and your building type and everything like that. So we really love emphasizing that and making it fun. Maybe an energy assessment party or walking tour. We have these partner communities across the city, mostly in downtown, in the East End, but also in Bedford Park as well, and in some workplaces, which are just opportunities to have conversations and have mutual support. So our partner communities section of our website has all the different partner communities and what they do. And if you're interested in helping your neighbors out with this sort of thing, there's an interest form there. Maybe we can work with you and to help your neighbors get excited about heat pumps, say if you already have one or you're in the process of getting one. Then finishing up here with the online support, the Home Retrofit Forum is a really well-moderated Facebook group that gets into the nitty-gritty. You can ask personalized questions, and people are just very happy to answer them. People love getting into these technical questions, so highly recommend introducing your project to the Home Retrofit Forum there. And that's our presentation. So I just want to say a quick thank you to our funders, that's Toronto Hydro and the Atmospheric Fund for, funding this forward-looking grassroots community work. It's really fantastic. And thank you to our speakers and to everyone that joined us as well. So with that, we can jump into the question and answers section properly. So I'm going to stop my share now, and there may be some messages from you guys, but this is also a good time for you guys to dump some questions that you've been hanging on to into the chat, and we'd be able to engage with those. So I see Karen's